it actually takes a woman about as long to bring herself to orgasm through masturbation as it takes a man. What happens is when a woman, especially when a woman and a man get together, this is where the wheels come off the bus. This is where the orgasm gap shows up, right? Women making love to women, pretty reliable rates of orgasm there.
Yeah.
But women and men making love together is where we see the orgasm gap,
Yeah.
especially when they're having sex outside of a context of an established relationship. So hookup sex is the least reliable orgasm producing sex that a woman can have.
I posted a question on my Instagram story yesterday, and I asked the people who follow me on Instagram that if they could ask a question from a sex therapist, what would it be? And I not only woke up today to so many questions, but it also like opened this door of people just like opening up and venting about their problems. So
I bet it did.
Yeah, I woke up to like paragraphs of like just people's problems, and I was like, look guys, I am not qualified to have this conversation with you, but it just sounds like a lot of you need to see a therapist.
That's right.
Right. So that's
those are my DMs every day, Pani. Like it is, you open Pandora's box.
So that's what I told them. I was like, I'm not going to give you an advice on that because I'm not qualified, but I absolutely think that you should see a therapist because I think they're going to be able to give you like at least clear it up for you so you can come to solutions yourself, or at the very least, like you'll have someone who's going to like listen to you and you'll vent.
That's right. Exactly.
Right.
So have you had therapists on your podcast before?
Yes. So I've had just like a psychologist therapist, but I've never had an intimacy coach, a relationship therapist, a sex therapist. And I've been wanting to have someone like that on for a really long time.
Good.
Just because these things are not talked about enough.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. That's right. Absolutely. There's a lot of shame. And I think because sex education, certainly in the US and elsewhere in the world as well, because sex education is so poor, it's like we don't even have enough language to know what we don't know or how to even ask the questions about what we don't know. So I think there are a number of barriers to people really like having heartfelt conversations about intimacy and sex and sexuality.
Yes, exactly. Like as you said, the guilt and the shame that comes with the topic of sex really makes it hard to be open about it and ask your questions and seek help.
Right. That's right. Yep. So we just need to be careful to not refer to me as a sex therapist because that's a particular kind of certification that I don't have. I'm a couples therapist who specializes in intimacy. And so just in terms of the language the copy that you use and how you refer to me, and we can even talk about that there's, here's the things you bring to a therapist and here's what you specifically might want to bring to a sex therapist, a certified sex therapist. So we can even talk about that if that's something that you want to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, why don't you just explain the differences a little bit?
Okay.
Like, what would it be?
Well, so within the field within mental health, there's a number of different disciplines, and people can have different specialties. But there is a particular kind of certificate that a therapist might get to become a certified sex therapist. And sex therapists deal with relationship problems, and relationship therapists deal with sexual problems. But there are times when, especially when a sexual problem has a physiological component, an emotional component, and a relational component, where it really might be lovely to bring that problem to a sex therapist who has really deep training in how to think about mind, body, and relationship around sexual problems.
Yeah. So, okay, that makes sense. 'Cause I would think that like you would just take all of your questions to one therapist, but you're right, you're like, you can't take all your problems to someone who obviously has studied psychology, but might only be 100% qualified in like one aspect of the field of psychology, because it's so expand.
Right, and it's not, yeah, and it's not a client's job to figure out if their therapist is qualified. It's the client's job to say, this is my problem, and then the therapist to say, you know what, that is totally within my realm of expertise, let's do it. Or to say, you know what, I don't have the depth of knowledge that you really need and deserve, let me refer you to my colleague. You know what I mean?
Right, absolutely. Okay, so then just a quick introduction on Dr. Alexandra Solomon. Am I saying that right? Solomon? Yeah. So she's a therapist, professor, and speaker. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, and her work on relational awareness has helped many people around the world. And you also teach at the Northwestern University, right? Okay, so very, very cool. Let's jump into a few of the questions. I asked my Instagram followers a few questions to provide that they would want to ask from a therapist, and I have a few of my own. So this one that I find very interesting myself, and a lot of people have also asked this question, was how come women can't orgasm nearly as many times as we would like to? Like what things it depends on, and what are some of the things that like we could do to enhance our sexual experiences as women?
Oh, I cannot even tell you how much I love this question. Good. This is a wonderful place for us to start. Okay, so when we do that, we are going to have to do, so we're going to look at this through three lenses. We're going to look at the big cultural lens, the lens that has to do with like interpersonal, like between a woman and her partner, and then we're going to look at what happens inside of the woman, like her own thoughts and feelings. So in terms of our culture is completely screwed up when it comes to women's sexuality. So my first book was called Loving Bravely, and it was a really broad, holistic introduction to this idea of relational self-awareness, understanding who we are in the context of our intimate relationships. And I like hit send on that book, and then I realized, oh shoot, I have a lot to say about sexuality, because everything that has to do with the self and relationship is true around sexuality. And so my second book is called Taking Sexy Back, and it is a deep dive into sexual self-awareness, specifically for vulva-bodied people, for people who've been socialized in the feminine in our culture. And the stuff that I learned in researching this book broke my heart, enraged me, and then made me even more passionate about this whole project of healing women around the issue of sexuality. So do you know that, you know, women for thousands and thousands of years have had as a part of our anatomy, part of the vulva-bodied anatomy, is the clitoris, right? So the clitoris is the seat of female pleasure. It is an organ that has no purpose on earth besides pleasure. It does nothing else. There's no other purpose it has besides just to feel good.
Pretty big purpose.
That's right.
It's like she does one thing, but that one thing is very big.
That's right. And she's like, you can let me know when you need me, and I will be there, but not for anything else.
Yeah.
She's like a little queen on her throne.
Right,
really
exactly. She just sits there.
Right, that's right. And wait. So, but you know, so you can see like that there's a part of the clitoris you can see externally, but the structure is 4 inches. It extends into the labia towards the pubic bone, and the full anatomy of the clitoris was not fully diagrammed until like the year 2000.
What?
But it's been around for thousands of years, right? Like the clitoris isn't new, but our ability to understand the clitoris is new. So there was a feminist researcher who went back through archives of like medical anatomy textbooks. And what she found is until very recently, the clitoris was actually blurred out of anatomy textbooks so that doctors couldn't even learn about it. Nobody understood the full dimensions of the clitoris. And so it reminds us that we don't get answers to questions we don't ask. So there was a collective intentional ignorance about the clitoris until very, very recently.
Oh my God.
So this whole thing, like, women's orgasms, they're just such a mystery. It's like, of course they're a mystery if you don't ask questions to understand. This new wave of feminist, of women's sexual health researchers have started to ask questions. And it turns out if you ask a woman what makes her come, she can actually tell you, right? Women who have had, women especially who have masturbated, who have explored their own bodies, they can really tell you the kinds of touch they like. They know what works. It actually takes a woman about as long to bring herself to orgasm through masturbation as it takes a man. What happens is when a woman, especially when a woman and a man get together, this is where the wheels come off the bus. This is where the orgasm gap shows up, right? Women making love to women, pretty reliable rates of orgasm there.
Yeah.
But women and men making love together is where we see the orgasm gap,
Yeah.
especially when they're having sex outside of a context of an established relationship. So hookup sex is the least reliable
Oh yeah.
orgasm producing sex that a woman can have, because in order for her to have an orgasm, she's going to need to be a bit in the driver's seat. And she's going to need to be able to say, like, listen, you may have met some vulvas, but you have not met this vulva. So I'm going to need to have some agency and have some, and be able to co-create this with you.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem happens. It's the heterosexual sexual script that creates an orgasm gap. Okay,
absolutely. And you need to like have a certain level of just comfort with a person to be able to tell them like, do this, do that. And you just don't have that when it's like just like a hookup, or, you know, just like a one night stand or whatever. You know, you're just not comfortable enough to tell them like what you want, what you need.
That's right. Which is, you know, especially for women who are having sex with men, it's really important that men understand, listen, if you're going to have a one night stand with a woman, you need to really center that whole thing on her pleasure.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, it's not women's fault that it's hard to speak up. It's also really important for men to be thoughtful and curious and asking.
Yes.
And when we think about how men are socialized, right? Men are socialized to be leaders and to be tough and to not be curious and not ask questions. Like there's all kinds of stuff about how we socialize men that gets in the way of them entering a sexual experience with what's needed to be a good lover, right? What makes a good lover is like deep, deep, deep curiosity and patience.
Yes. Yes. And sex is just so catered to men. Like we're at this time and age, and still sex is like still for men, you know, like most women, most girls like do it to pleasure the guy because they might get their O, but probably they won't. And you just kind of like, he takes the lead, as you said, most of the time. And it's kind of like a little bit looked down on when like a woman, you know, like knows what she wants. And like the people are so quick to like call women that are like more confident, like aggressive, for example, you know. So all those things really makes sex just like be for guys. And I hate that.
That's right. That's right. Well, what I hate most about it is, you're right, that if she has feedback, if she's like, listen, like what I would love to do with you is this, what feels so good to me, what would feel so good to me is if you would do this. Sharing that is like, that's beautiful feedback, because what it does is it invites him to be a provider of pleasure. The problem is he's been socialized that to equate feedback with weakness, right? That somehow if he needs direction, if he needs support, if you know, if he needs to be redirected, somehow that makes him weak or a lousy lover. Like it's just it's so topsy-turvy, it's so upside down.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes me really sad that women have experiences that when they come away from that sexual experience, they're sort of like, meh, like what was the big deal with that? When really I want all of us to have sexual experiences that we come away from feeling even more grounded in ourselves, even more connected to our bodies, whether or not, you know, sort of whether or not this person becomes a longer term partner is sort of neither here nor there. It's about, did this experience leave me feeling really at home in my own skin. That's what everybody
Absolutely.
deserves.
Yeah. And yeah, you point out something good, like men, there's such an ego part of men that like is correlated with sex. It's like if you give too many directions and they're not doing it the right way, like they might even think like, oh, she's so difficult, you know? But it's like, no, you didn't do your research. You don't really know what to do. Like, that hurts, by the way, like
That's
what you're
right.
doing.
That's
Because like
right.
you didn't do the most basic, like read, like guys get obsessed with sex from like when? 14. It's like you had all this time to look something up. Like you guys think about it so much. Like men think about
Uh-huh.
sex so much, and it's like you still did not take the time to just like look up the most basic thing about it. And so like
Absolutely.
then they will like call a girl like or think about like, oh, she's difficult, or like, you know, maybe she's like this or like that. It's like, no, dude, like you just suck.
Well, that's right. And if he is, you know, most likely where his research is coming from is Pornhub. And
Pornhub.
the problem is mainstream porn does not really show women-centered sexual experiences,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying, you know, there are lots of things. I mean, some women really like a really deep thrust or you know, more vigorous, like there are I'm not saying that there's any rights or wrongs, but some of the assumptions we see in pornography, that a woman is available and ready for penetration really quickly, that the goal is, you know, like really rapid thrusting, or that there's some things that are shown in pornography that may actually be, as you're saying, maybe painful and may be fine, but they need a really long lead up, right?
Right.
And that they so I think that if a man's sex education has mostly come from porn, and the research shows that that we're all, you know, anybody who's like younger than age 35 has been basically raised on a steady diet of free streaming porn, maybe not quite 35, certainly younger than 30, has
Yeah.
had, you know, porn as their primary sex education tool. And
Yeah.
there's really beautiful porn now that often is behind a paywall, right? But porn that is really relationship centered, that's really female centered, that really celebrates like diverse bodies. But that's not what you get when you open up, you know, Pornhub. That's not what you're being shown. And so I think you're
Right.
right that men oftentimes bring these scripts or these notions that are informed by pornography rather than being informed by the person that they are
Right.
creating the
Yeah.
experience with.
And it's like trying to learn sex from porn is like trying to learn love from a chick flick Hollywood movie. It just doesn't work, because Pornhub is kind of like it's production. It's a film production. It's like nothing that you see there is real, and you like bring those expectations into real life, and for girls and for guys. And it's like you get disappointed because you're like, well, it was not like the movie I watched, you know? So yeah, it just ruins your expectations a lot as well. Really,
That's
really,
right.
really bad. Like I think like even psychologically too, it really ruins a lot of as I said, like you never see a porn with women, it's always like student or nurse, you know,
Right.
something like very like in like a weak position. Like you never see a CEO lady like porn, you know, it's really rare. it's always like the it's always the guy is like in control and the leader and like doing like
Yeah.
all the like, you know, whatever.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, and it actually breaks my heart for men, because there's something that can be so healing for a man to enter a sexual experience like as a student, as a learner, like to allow somebody else to take the lead. And I think it really is. I think you're so right that when men have internalized the notion that I have to be in charge and I have to be sure, it keeps them from being vulnerable. And vulnerability is what helps us feel close to people and helps us feel safe with people. And I think that a lot of men, I mean, I have been teaching at Northwestern for 20 years, and so I've been blessed to have tons of conversations with, you know, college age men about how incredibly like terrified they are of letting their partner down, really. And so
Yeah.
all of that bravado is oftentimes a cover for a fear of, what if my penis doesn't get hard fast enough? What if I come too soon? What if it takes me too long? What if I lose my erection? Like it's that mainstream heterosexual script is also so erection focused in a way that really deprives
Mm-hmm.
men of the experience of really feeling sexual with their whole bodies, right? That their whole bodies are a source of giving and receiving pleasure versus just like what the heck their penis is doing, which is, you know, not
Yeah.
that interesting. Or not the only interesting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what are physiological differences between men and women, like hormonal, neurological differences between men and women, and how it affects their attachment afterwards, after having sex? Like, how is it that women get so much more attached after having sex and like men don't, you know?
Right. So first of all, I would say that the differences within, so first of all, you know, gender is more than a binary, right? So there's lots of, so I think we make these neat categories of men are and women are, but gender we know is kind of more expansive than just that binary. And that even if we do want to talk about men versus women, there are far more differences within men than there are between men and women. There's more differences within women than there are between women and men. So I think it's an interesting question though, because I think that it does, you know, I'm always going to go to sort of socialization, like how we socialize girls and, you know, girls and boys from a very early age that maybe create some of the things that people see oftentimes. And what I know to be true is that by the time little boys are 3, we touch them less, we talk to them less, and we give them tons of messages about standing on their own 2 feet and don't cry. And we say things like, some of the worst things you can call a boy are girl things, right? Like, don't be a sissy, don't be a girl, you throw like a girl, you run like a girl. So we like ingrain this like contempt for women inside of men and boys from a very early age, and then we expect them to grow up and love and respect and honor women. So it's pretty messed up. So I think that I think what the question asker, you know, is sort of feeling like is that there are times when she has had sex with a guy and then he has maybe pulled away afterwards.
Like, I think what I'm trying to ask is there a physiological difference in men and women after they have sex? For example, like I know like the level of production of oxytocin in men and women is different when they have sex.
Mm-hmm.
So like, could that be a reason?
I do think you're right that you know, oxytocin is for sure a human thing, but there's a way in which it is certainly like a bit more associated with you know, female bodied people than male bodied people. And so I do think that may affect attachment, but I certainly have known women who are able to, you know, enjoy casual sex without attaching. And I certainly have known men who aren't able to, you know, unhook sex and attachment. So I think there is a way in which it's bigger than just our gender, and it has to do with how much we can be honest with ourselves. Like, I think what's hard for me to see is that I think oftentimes people say, I'm going to just have a casual relationship with you because they're afraid of saying the hard thing, which is, I really like you. And I really do want to get to know you better. And I really would love for you to take your app off your phone and just build a relationship with me for a while. Let's see where this goes. So I think there's ways in which we abandon ourselves and don't speak our truths because it's really hard. So I think that to me is the more interesting way to go than thinking purely about hormonal or physiological differences. I just don't think they capture as much or help us as much as really like thinking about, okay, so how are you able to check in with yourself before? Are you having sex because you really want to? Have you said to the person you're about to have sex with, like, listen, this for me is just an experience of pleasure and play with you. I'm really not in a space to build a relationship. Are you truthful? You know, do the 2 of you have an agreement of what this is and what each person's expectations are?
Right. So like what you're saying, I understand it, but it's also very logical. Like sometimes you set logical boundaries, but then let's say a certain hormone gets produced and it kind of throws you off of your logical expectations that you had set prior to that. And that I think can play a big role because you don't have control over that. You know, if a certain hormone is getting produced in you more than your male partner, you are going to feel certain ways more than him, whether or not you guys had set very logical boundaries prior to it happening or not, right?
Oh, I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right. And I think some people, I think if that's what somebody is noticing as their pattern, then they may say to themselves, like, listen, I would love to live in a body where I can have casual sex, but what I know for myself is I don't work that way. I go big or I go home, you know? And so for me, I'm going to hold on. I'm not going to layer in sexual intimacy until there's some kind of agreement that you and I are exclusive and we are working on building something together.
Right.
And that's not because she's difficult. It's not because she's high maintenance. It's because she's actually sick of abandoning herself. She's sick of acting like she doesn't know something that she actually knows to be true about herself. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So that's, and that might be sad. She might feel really sad. She might feel like, I wish that I could just, you know, have sex with somebody and be playful, but I know myself and I know that I know it's big for me. I know it's big for me. I know that it comes with a deepening. And so I'm not going to do that with somebody. I'm going to stick to masturbation. You know, I'm going to hold a boundary with this partner. And I know I'm not being difficult. I know I'm not being controlling. I know I'm just actually being truthful.
Right. And kudos to a woman like that, because not only she has taken the time to gain that self-awareness and know what works and doesn't work for her, she also knows how to set boundaries, even if, like, you know, it means that she won't be able to see this guy that she might really like, and actually being disciplined and sticking with her boundaries. So all of those things go into making a decision like that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. That's the whole thing about boundaries, is they're not punishment. They're not manipulation. They're actually saying, this is what I need to do to be my best self. And actually, if we're going to do anything, dating, hooking up, anyway, I need to be my best self. You deserve me to be my best self.
Yeah. Not everyone is the Samantha in the Sex and the City. Have you watched that show?
That's right.
Not everyone gets to be her.
That's right. And there's no better and there's no worse, right?
Yeah.
There's no better. There's just truthfulness about who we are.
So how we mentioned how people get their knowledge from Pornhub. You actually spoke about that in your TEDx speech as well. And most students, especially men, get their knowledge of sex from Pornhub, and it shows. What are some ways you can tell people to develop their knowledge of sexual subjects? Like, what do you recommend?
I really recommend being thoughtful about the kind of porn you consume. Like, I'm not anti-porn. I'm anti-porn that reinforces all the stuff that we've been talking about. So in the back of my Taking Sexy Back book, I have like a whole list of resources. Like, my team and I did research on like high quality, ethical, well-curated porn. Same thing, same reason that people choose, you know, organic vegetables or grass-fed beef, is like, you care what you put in your body, like you care what you consume. It matters what you consume. And so like a great place to start is Erica Lust, is one of my favorite like feminist porn creators. And she has a really wonderful TED Talk, and she has a porn production company. So she's a great place. She's a great place to start. And so I think we can be thoughtful about the erotica, right? Like there's all kinds of reasons that people may want to use porn. It can be really healing. It can teach you about what you want. It can, for a monogamous long-term couple, it can kind of like inject a little bit of novelty and play within, you know, a dynamic. So, but it just is a matter of being thoughtful about it and knowing that it sinks in, right? It sinks into layers of our brain. You know, the part of our brain that is conscious is like a little bitty part that we're conscious of how we're being affected. It's the deeper, like less than conscious ways in which the porn we consume may actually be compromising our ability to feel pleasurable. Now maybe we're comparing our bodies now to the bodies of porn performers, and you know, we don't look like a porn performer, or we don't make noises like a porn performer does, or we don't we aren't interested in the kinds of things that this performer is interested in doing or able to do.
Right.
So that's
Absolutely.
I think that's a really big part of it. And then
Yeah.
we live in the time, the beautiful thing about this age that we're in, of podcasts and books and these conversations being brought forward, is also like, curating your Instagram feed. So following really wonderful sex positive accounts. I love Dawn Sarah has a beautiful podcast. The Pleasure Mechanics have been doing this work for like 15 years. For parents, there's one called Sex Positive Parenting. So there's all kinds of like resources out there
Yeah.
for just like, like choosing like the kinds of Instagram feeds that really nourish you and move you to a place of feeling sexually whole on, from the inside out.
Yeah, I'm gonna follow all those pages, and maybe I'll provide a link for everyone too, because you're very right. Like you have to be so aware of all the things you consume, because at the end of the day, they're gonna build up and make up who you are and how your life is gonna then pan out day to day. It's like you can't smoke cigarettes and just have really bad habits and drink every night and then wonder why your kidney is failing you and why you get wrinkles so quickly and why you're drained of your energy, because your consumption habits are a certain way that are not healthy. So it's like we spend so much time on YouTube, and I know so many people now, so many of like people in my generation that are so fascinated by self-development and self-awareness. And I see my friends who read books all the time and they're constantly gaining knowledge, and I love that. But it's like, how many of the books that you read are related to this topic? Self-help books are great, but it's like, have you ever picked up like a sex related book, anything that like expand your knowledge in that field?
Pani, you are making such a good point, and you're right. We act like sex is something that we do, but sex is a part of who we are. Sex is like to be connected to our sexuality is to be connected to our creativity, our passion, our power, our life force, right? Sex is so much more than just a behavior. And so you're right that when we think about self-work, working on ourselves, but if we leave out integration of our sexual self, understanding of our bodies, understanding of all the messages we've been internalizing our whole lives about sex, if we leave that part out of our self-work, we're leaving out a really important part of it, and it's going to affect us. It's not like we have this life and then we go to bed with somebody and it's a different life. Like that's still ourself. And so all the stuff we do out there, we want to make sure it comes with us into the bedroom. And I think there's oftentimes a split of like the me and then the me that has sex, and that's problematic. And it just compromises our ability to feel really full as we can feel, as healthy as well as we can feel.
Yeah. No, I agree. And like all of these, just like how we lack in all of these different ways to educate ourselves, like come out in things like faking an orgasm. And it's like, what woman has not done that? Like, is there any woman that would just be like, no, I've never faked an orgasm? Like, do you think so? Do you think that woman exists?
I think she's a rare woman. And I think that the fact that we're saying it this way just shows how incredibly out of touch, many of us are around our sexuality. And we see it, as you said right at the beginning, women oftentimes see it as a service they provide,
yes,
rather than something they get to really, really enjoy. And that comes, that comes from thousands of years of patriarchy, right? Where sex was like really thought of as like a wifely duty. It was a duty you perform rather than something you get to experience. And so I think it's so exciting that we all are living in a time when we actually get to figure out how to have mutually pleasurable experiences, but that requires us to like, unload all the programming that we have internalized, men and women both. Women can't, for straight people, women cannot do this all on their own. It's why when I wrote this whole book about empowering female sexuality, and then I wrote a chapter for men, because I was like, oh my God, if women are taking their sexy back, like claiming their sexuality, we got to make sure that the men understand what they're up to and how they can make some really important shifts, because we have to heal, together.
Yeah. I ordered your book. I can't wait to start reading it. But I have this conversation with so many guys, so many men, where you know how like guys a lot of times they like gloat about like their sex game, and they're like, yeah, I've always like made every girl come, and like and I'm like, no, you didn't. No, I didn't. Trust me. Like, I'm not trying to be a bitch, but like, trust me when I tell you that we're great actresses, and like we do all. And he's like, no, but I saw all the signs. And I'm like, first of all, you probably don't even know all the signs. Like, the things that you think you saw can so easily be faked. Like, it doesn't even take an Oscar winning person to do that. It's extremely easy. So I'm really sorry to break it to you, but you're probably not that great.
Yep.
And it's like women always try to secure the guy's ego when it comes to this, because men's ego is so attached to like their sexuality and like them performing like their best. And like as women, we're nurturing and we want to like protect their ego and make them feel good, so we go through that whole faking thing. But I think more and more women, I'm hearing it, that they don't do it anymore. They don't fake it anymore. They will just straight up like let a guy know that like, oh, that wasn't that great.
Mhm. Yep.
And I love that.
I love it too. One of my, a student of mine told me one time that she had her, like her aha moment came when she realized that if she was faking, especially during a one night stand or a hookup, then she was not protecting the women who were going to follow after her, because
Yeah.
this man was going to leave so it was like her wake up call was when she started to think about other people instead of herself, which is like so classic woman, right? It's like the
Yeah.
pleaser. But the person she was deciding to please was the next woman this guy was going to have sex with. She was like, if I fake it with him, he's going to think that feels good, and then the next person he's with, he'll do it again, and I know darn well it didn't feel good for me, and so probably it's not going to feel good for her. So that was her like getting sober moment, was like, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. And I think you're right, Pani, that so often this happens because we have spent a lifetime catering to men's egos in really, really micro ways, right? Praising our boss more than he needed to be praised.
Mm-hmm.
All of the ways in which we are forever watching the micro indicators that a man is feeling less than awesome. And so of course we bring that pattern into the bedroom, and because we know, as you just said, we know how much men tie their sense of worth to their sexuality, which is really problematic and really destructive. So it's a perfect storm, and we understand why it happens. But it doesn't serve anybody. And every time she fakes, she just takes herself that much further away from her own sexuality, because then she hasn't learned actually what would give her an orgasm. And the last thing I'll say about this is that there might be a time when she has an immensely pleasurable experience with a man.
Yeah.
That does not lead to an orgasm, right? But where she at the end is like, holy fuck, I love that.
Yeah.
I was so present. I was so open. I loved the way we were touching. I loved the smells. I loved all of it. I didn't have an orgasm, which is kind of fine because there was so much pleasure. You know what I mean? So there can be, we need to really, I would like us to move to a world where the orgasm isn't the end all be all. But until we get to that world, then I do want to at least close the orgasm gap, in the meantime. Because it's a bummer.
And a lot of times when you're so not focused on the orgasm and you're just focused on like feeling all the feelings and being in the moment and actually enjoying everything that's happening, that will be followed by an orgasm. Then if you're so focused on the orgasm and you try to like really control the situation to get that, like if you have an attachment to a certain outcome, then you kind of miss the point of enjoying the whole thing, and you probably won't get the outcome you want. Would you agree?
100% I would agree. Yes, 100% I would agree. That's there's a funny thing that like when people go to sex therapy, oftentimes it is because of orgasm difficulties. Somebody's coming too soon, somebody's not coming at all, and the sex therapist is like, listen, we are not like the last thing in the world I care about is your orgasm. What I care about is helping you to reestablish safety, reestablish a sense of connection, enjoy touch, like enjoy mindful touch. And so orgasms are really just like taken out of the entire equation, at least for a while people come back to the basics of just being near each other and feeling present and happy and playful and silly and, you know, however they want to be feeling, right? Because that's what the whole realm of the erotic offers us, is a chance to feel alive and to feel connected to ourselves and somebody else.
Yeah.
And then the orgasm, you know, the orgasm lasts for only a little bitty part of the whole thing anyways. And so to be kind of chasing it misses, as you said, misses the point.
Right. The orgasm should just be like the cherry on top.
That's right. Okay. So what do the guys say when you convince these guys that really, you know, women have faked with them before? What do they say? What's the...
Most of them will insist on saying that I'm wrong and they're right. Because when you have your identity attached to a certain storyline, if somebody tries to break that, you kind of take that as an attack to your character. And you will do anything to prevent that from happening. If you're presented with new information and data, a lot of times you will reject that new information in order to contain what you have believed for such a long time and you've told yourself. And it's confirmation bias and it's not objective, and you're, you know, it's like you see it all the time. But yeah, that's really what I see all the time. It's like they insist that they're right and I'm wrong. And, you know, it's that conversation is mostly happening at a party. So I don't want to, like, you know, also be that girl that, like, ruins the night for everyone. So I'm just like, okay, buddy. So I'm just like, okay, let me talk to some of those girls. let's really see. Like, I want to take it that far, but then I'm
that's
like,
right.
no.
That's right. You got your pen and pencil out, and you're like, okay, is she here? May I go talk to her?
Yeah.
Right. Well, what I would love for him to take away from, you know, those guys to take away from that conversation with you is then like a question to themselves of like, okay, so next time around, how am I going to ensure that the partner I'm with is able to be honest with me? Like, how do I make her feel safe enough that she really is going to be straight with me about it? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I would hope his reckoning would be, is I don't, you know, sort of saying like, I don't want to be that guy anymore that women feel like they have to lie to, or where that could even happen with me.
Right.
Because I really do believe in my heart of hearts. I've spent 20 years working with mostly couples and mostly straight couples. And I can tell you without a shred of doubt that when I'm sitting with a couple, if they've been married 2 years or 50 years, he is so anchored on how he looks in her eyes, meaning how she perceives him. Like, you know, his ability to be held in warm regard by her is so important, right? It's so important. Like, he really wants to be pleasing. He really wants to be of service. He really wants to be admired. And so that, like, I think the heart of it is there, but everything gets so distorted, because I really do think that men really do want to give their female partners orgasms.
Yeah.
I really do think that. Most of them. I'm sure there are some men that are incredibly selfish and don't care.
Yeah.
But I think that they do want to. And so it's like all the raw material is there for him to, if he could just be more curious and more patient and in a learning mode. And then if she could be a bit more brave, right? A bit more brave in saying, actually, I do deserve pleasure. And I actually spent, you know, a bit of time exploring my body, understanding my parts, you know, like understanding what works for me. And so now I can present you. Because I think sometimes even if a guy says, you know, how can I get you off? She might feel really flooded because actually she doesn't really even know the answer.
Yeah, I agree. And masturbation plays a big part in that, because like you need to learn yourself before you can teach it to someone else. Right. And that the guys being open to even learn, because so many guys always think that they're already so great that there is nothing to learn. So they're not open to learn. Like those guys that I have those conversations with, like when they insist on their ways, what that shows to me is their lack of open-mindedness to learn something new. Because I'm telling you, I'm trying to tell you something and you're just rejecting it.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have to have that open-mindedness of like wanting to learn something new.
Absolutely. It's the whole, I mean, that's the whole thing with intimacy is just letting ourselves be, like the words I say over and over again, I feel like are humble and curious, humble and curious. Like that's what it takes to be a great lover. It's what it takes to be a great partner. It's what it takes to be a great, leader or employee or friend, right? To be
Yeah,
humble and to be curious.
absolutely. Do we have time for one more question?
We totally do. Mm-hmm.
Yay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question that everybody in their answers that I asked on my story yesterday wanted to know. And does size really matter?
Oh my gosh. That's a great question. What I think is so interesting, okay, here's what the research shows. The research shows that when you give women like a menu of the kinds of sexual behaviors that are going to create an orgasm for her, the least orgasm producing thing on the sexual menu is penetrative sex. Penis and vagina sex is the least orgasm producing behavior because of where, the vagina. So when we think about like the vulva, like the vagina, the vaginal opening isn't really where all of the this sort of like sensory feel good orgasm producing tissue is. It's much more in the clitoris and
Yes.
deeper, sort of deeper structures. So maybe penetrative sex, with an additional hand or toy, something where the clitoris is also being engaged. But most women really like the more reliable pathways to orgasm have to do with hands and mouths and not necessarily penises.
Yeah.
So not that, not to shame women who love penetrative sex, with a large penis, whatever, like that's not to shame or to judge, but just to say that the research shows that actually if we take that to be true, then size matters less, right?
Yes.
Size matters less than the kind of energy he's bringing to the experience and the willingness to be really holistic with her entire vulva rather than just focusing on, penetration itself.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to say that size matters a whole lot less than we all have made it out to be.
I really think so too. I think it's just like a cool thing to have, just kind of like big boobs for women, it's just like attractive to just, I don't know, get in a bedroom and just whip out this gigantic schlong. But then like you might not know how to use it and we're back to square one.
That's right. That's right.
Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Or for a particular woman, it may be really hard to accommodate a ginormous schlong. It may be, maybe a little, so she may be a little bit, less comfortable. And it's such like, just like the big boobs thing. What the hell can you do about it anyways? Like you're born with the penis that you're born with. And so I really would want any man to feel deeply proud of and deeply connected to his penis, no matter how it looks, and to not tie his worth to his penis any more than any of us should be tying our worth to our boobs or our, how our labia look or any of the things, how our booties look, like any of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like we're so much more than the size or shape of our parts.
Absolutely. I think if you have a smaller than average penis and you go do your research and you come back with a great game, that's kind of like turning around what you were given. Those people that are like born into like extremely poor families in like third world countries, and then they come out like winning, like with flying colors, and they become like doctors and lawyers and they change the world. Be that person.
Be that person. That's right. Absolutely. Be somebody that a woman gets in the bedroom with and feels like her most full, aligned, present self. Like be that, right? The bottom line, women's sexuality by and large is incredibly narcissistic. Like women, like there's been research where they'll have couples have sex in front of a mirror and he's looking at her in the mirror and she's looking at her in the mirror, which kind of sums it all up. Women. So if you are a man with a smaller than average penis, but you know how to make her feel like she is the center of the world, she's going to come away from that experience feeling really, really good.
Yeah. Okay. Where do fetishes come from? Like weird fetishes, like foot fetish and like poop fetish. Do you know?
Right. I think this is a really complicated realm, and a realm where I, by and large, would defer to one of my colleagues who has studied fetishes like
Oh,
deeply. You know
really?
what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So because I do think that sometimes I think sometimes a fetish is an attempt to resolve or reverse something that was painful in our past, right?
Yeah.
We to
Yeah.
kind of master something that was painful or something that was humiliating or something that felt out of control. I think that is sometimes where a fetish comes from. And
Yeah.
sometimes where a fetish comes from is the fact that for any of us, our sexuality is like wide as the sky and deep as the ocean. You know what I mean? Like it just is that our sexualities are expansive and vast. And so what turns us on can be can be really expansive and really diverse and may change over time. And so I worry about somebody becoming very narrowly focused on, I can only get turned on if these exact conditions are in place. If that
Mhm.
person was my client, I would want to be helping them have a bit more like flexibility and nuance in their sexual story, right? Rather than
Mhm.
I have to just have these particular things in place. So that might be one way where I would work with a fetish. If it was a fetish that was like, this is the only way I can get turned on anymore, I would
Yeah.
want to be playing with other storylines. But I think also that's such a fun part about being in relationship, is being able to kind of explore each other's fantasies and support each other's fantasies. And it doesn't
Right.
have to be the only thing, but especially for couples, who are making love over a long period of time,
Yeah.
they get to play and sort of, support each other's journeys.
Yeah. And you gotta like also be open to like be ready to hear something really weird, and like
Mhm.
don't like act all like, don't make the other person feel all like weird and like they can't share their deepest, darkest parts of themselves with you. Like if
Yep.
you're a real partner, I feel like you should allow a safe space for the other person to feel comfortable enough to think that they can show all sides of themselves to you, even like the ugly, even the weird,
Mhm.
all of that.
That's beautiful. Yep, that's beautiful. And when you say it that way, you're not saying anything about, whether or not the other person has to engage in the
Yeah.
fetish, because
Yeah.
but you're just saying to make space for it, to just make space. And I think the more we can each work on our own sexual self-awareness, the more we can be patient and non-shaming with somebody else's sexuality when we get the privilege of hearing about somebody else's sexuality. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then
And
like,
yeah, and it takes time. It takes time to build that kind of trust where we can like peel
exactly.
back layers and layers. Hmm.
And then together as a couple, you can kind of come up with a solution that works for the both of you. Let's say you don't want to
Yes,
do that, and then you guys kind of talk about it. Maybe we don't have to do it that often. Maybe we just do it like once
right.
a year. Or like, if I do this for you, maybe you can do that other thing for me. You can kind of like compromise and come to like a mutual solution that works for the both of you. Or you could just be
Absolutely.
like, dude, no, like, I don't like that.
Right.
Don't.
There are times where two people ought not be in a relationship because their sexual scripts are just so far apart that everyone's going to feel frustrated. Everyone's going
Yeah.
to feel disappointed. But most of the time, there's overlap, and then what you're saying makes total sense. Compromise,
Yeah.
agreements, flexibility.
Yeah. I think, oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. This is so much fun. I love it.
Have me back on. We'll do another one.
Okay. Okay. I'll let you go. But we should for sure do another one. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
It's so fun to talk to you. It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for making time, and hope you have a
Absolutely.
really good day.
Okay, take care.
Bye. Bye,
Bye,
guys.
Pani.
Bye.